Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Full Crew, and what a lineup we have today. I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your co-hosts.
Hey, and I'm Mike Peel, your other co host. We've got a great lineup of guests today. We also have some great topics. We're going to be discussing the FAA's initiative to help train public safety officials. We're going to be talking about $5 billion in funding, investment funding that's gone to the drone industry and how that's getting distributed. I think that's really interesting. We're also going to be talking about whether or not AI can hold a patent, and there's a real answer for that, at least in the United States. And finally, we're going to be talking about AI for preventative medicine, and are there any concerns there legally, and what's the benefit, and what are we risking for that benefit? So we're really excited. We have some amazing guests, like I said. We're going to start with Eszter, who's over here in the top right. Eszter Kovács, can you give us a quick bio about yourself?
Hi everyone, thanks for the great introduction. I'm Eszter Kovács, co-founder and CEO of DroneTalks, which is an online educational platform. We mostly covering European drones, AAM news, and we are based in Switzerland. So thanks for bringing me into the show, and I can highlight few European initiatives.
Yeah, we're always excited to get the international perspective, and specifically when it comes to drones, we've had some great friends and influencers from the Swiss contingency. So you're actually the second Swiss person on the show. So sorry. You didn't get first place.
Romeo,
But yeah,
Romeo
we had
Gersher,
Romeo.
right?
On
Yeah,
episode
our very
one.
first,
So
yep.
we are definitely happy to have the Swiss back on the show. So thank you for representing the whole country today. Uh, and then we also have another great guest who we've worked with before, Dave Krause. So Dave, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Mike, and Dawn and everybody. It's first time for me meeting Eszter. Pleasure to meet you as well. My name is Dave Krause. I'm co-owner of a company called Influential Drones. I come to the industry with a background in technology and software architecture. Do a lot of things with NIST. I am the industry member with the safety team, and we also do stuff with Airborne Public Safety Association and a lot of first responders.
And I want to say one thing real quick. Dave is like, so, first of all, they're both so humble. But Dave is in his new ginormous facility that he just moved into. So influential drones getting even more influential by the minute. So
Yeah,
Thank you for the shout out, Dawn. We'll be hiring soon.
you heard it first here. Um, so, Dave, let's talk about your article, and it's kind of related to everything you do. So, maybe walk us through this a little bit. Why did you think this was important?
Well, a lot of people have been thinking about the FAA not necessarily coming up with a proficiency exam or anything else relating to pilots. And here's an opportunity that the FAST team has taken to reach out to first responders and basically help them. This is not just responding with drones. This is more so actually responding to any aircraft that crashes or any incident. A lot of public safety people don't know what to do. They don't know where the fuel lines are. They don't know how to, properly cut into an aircraft. And the FAA has taken the initiative of doing that. Where I see it as basically being positive for our industry is the fact that we're creating those connections with the same public safety people that we can now talk to about responding and using drones. So if you imagine, instead of just naturally coming in and cutting a fuel line and pulling someone out of an aircraft, you could obtain situational awareness, learn how to fly around the drone, learn how to fly around the aircraft with the drone, get the information you need, and everything else. So I'm pretty excited about it. I've attended the class before. A gentleman by the name of Jay Flowers was the original creator of it, and it has since evolved since then.
Awesome. Dave, I when I was in the Air Force, I helped with the aircraft safety, the safety and what they call accident investigation boards. Right. So whenever we had a military aircraft go down, we just train everybody like just create a national security area around that aircraft and don't do anything until the right people get there. I would, with black boxes and now certainly if there's wounded people, right, you gotta move, you gotta get people out. But if it's a fatality, and we're seeing this, right, Dave, with like the Kobe Bryant situation, some folks went up and took some horrific photographs and things like this. Is NTSB involved in this training with the FAA as well, or is it just like an FAA initiative?
That's a good question. I don't, the classes that I've attended and what I've seen, we actually taught one ourselves about 2 years ago. I have not seen the NTSB participate, but they are a federal agency, so I imagine there is some participation. It's interesting you do bring up the Kobe Bryant point, because the NTSB did use a drone when they responded to that, and you are correct. There's a right and a wrong way to do it, and you need to secure it and make sure everybody's safe along the way. So it's really nice to see the FAA, pushing and getting the exposure they need, and reaching the right people.
Absolutely.
Eszter, do you have any feedback on how Europe deals with public safety training? I mean, each individual country, I'm sure, has their own public safety apparatus, but as far as I know, EASA is a universal body. So how does that work in situations like this?
Yes, I think Europe is a little bit different. As you mentioned, we have EASA, and if someone doesn't know, this is the European Aviation Safety Agency. And why is this super interesting? Because, when you want to fly or do something, you need to get through EASA approval in Europe, regarding safety. So you cannot fly without they give you a certification or they approve your drone. And, EASA standpoint is everything which flies is a risk, So why I'm saying this, because it's really tough to get through their processes and approvals. But if you get through, you can really have a license to fly everywhere in Europe, in every country, depends on Sale 1, Sale 2, Sale 3, Sale 4, depends on which category is your drone, how big is it. I don't want to go too much in details, but safety is federated, and it's basically working like this in Europe, and so EASA gives you the approval, and that can be implemented by countries, and they can issue you the certificate to fly. But basically everything is decided by EASA, and they really rough. They check 5 times everything which flies. As I said, it's a risk for them. Sometimes I have the impression they prefer nothing flies, just to be safe. I'm not sure if it's the same in America, but there's a safest if you don't fly. But of course that kills innovation. I think another interesting topic down what you mentioned, and I'm wondering a lot about this nowadays, and I haven't taken any action yet. But I'm not sure about in America, but when drones starts to fly on demand, they will have accidents. This is a fact, as aircraft has accidents. And we don't need to deny this. This will happen, and I think accidents are great because we learn from it, we build from it. If it doesn't really cause bigger damage than just the aircraft damage. But what I want to say that I think a new industry is coming up. It is an accident investigation in drones, very interestingly. And I see very little professionals, very little knowledge in that direction. There is a lot of inspections in aircraft, accident investigators, but I think this is the new knowledge which needed in the industry. Hey, when someone goes there, they are like a certified drone accident investigators, and I think if we have them, that's a good thing, because we can learn from the reports, we can progress with it, So I'm not sure how about in America, how is this going? Do you have drone accident investigators?
Well, not really, Eszter. I mean, just recently, the NTSB, our National Transportation Safety Board, that investigates all very significant transportation accidents, multimodal, ground, air, I believe even sea-based or water-based accidents. They just recently put out some definitions that would encapsulate, some of the kind of more significant drone accidents and a mandatory reporting requirement. So Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like within the last year or so, the FAA and NASA had put out, it's a NASA website. It's voluntary reporting of your accident. I know there's an acronym for it. Dave will know it. I don't recall it. But that was just kind of a little bit of a campaign like, hey, if you have an accident now, make sure you report it, because as you said, Eszter, we can learn from that. But when it comes to just, there's no mandatory reporting unless it meets a certain threshold. And I apologize, I don't recall, maybe Mike or Dave know those thresholds for NTSB right now. But I agree with you. I've been saying the same thing for a while, just with my Air Force experience. And, by the way, like we had kind of two levels. I said safety accident investigation. That was a privileged investigation. Those results were not released to the public because, you give the witnesses immunity so they will speak freely, because it's more important, frankly, to understand what actually happened. People get drug tested, all kinds of things during those investigations. The Aircraft Accident Investigation Board is a parallel and separate board in the Air Force. I think there could be a lot of lessons learned from here and kind of maybe, something that could be created from this, where it is public. And so they do their own independent investigation. Then they release a report and they say, here's what we found. So it was interesting where I worked. We had access to both. So very, very rarely would there be a difference between the two. And when there was, it got weird fast. Like, whoa, we know this over here, but it's different over here. Now what, right? So we'd have to work through those issues, and it was good. Lawyers need to know this stuff too. I'll stop talking now. Dave, Mike, go.
Well, I'm sure Dave has more intimate knowledge, so I'll let him take the floor on this one.
Well, no, so I think what you're talking about is the FAA incident database, which, I always like to say the FAA is, they're huge advocates for grabbing data and learning and being able to make their decisions, informed decisions based on data and information that they receive. So when we get into accidents, which is bound to happen, it's important for us to log those accidents, the causes, and even the effect of it, so that we can learn as a community, and the FAA can share that information throughout their group as well. The NTSB database, I was looking for that acronym you were talking about, Dawn. I couldn't find it, so what I was doing as we were talking, I just took another quick glance and I can't seem to find it, so sorry for that escaping me. As far as the dollar amount, it should be $500.
It is, or it should be, in your opinion?
It should be.
Oh, here it is. I found it. It's the it's the NASA ASRS, which is the Aviation Safety Reporting System. So that's the one. It's confidential, voluntary, non-punitive, but underline voluntary at this time. So that's significant. But you can go right now, you can Google asrs.arc.nasa.gov, and you'll find it, that reporting, if you ever have an accident. But think about insurance, think about, how do adjusters, play into this. There's just so many different nuances, I think, that need to be worked through. And sadly, it'll probably take the first big accident to really take a lot of lessons learned to then develop some policy or regulations from that.
So would the insurers be able to provide any information? Are they collecting, or are they just trying to keep that completely proprietary because basically they run their business model off of it?
It's funny you say that. I actually got into a phone call with one of the largest carriers out there, and what I was told is that they were actually looking at the data. They noticed there was less reports being filed, and they weren't sure if there was less accidents or just people were not filing claims. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that they noticed is that people were not, so after someone files a claim, they go and they check for accuracy, the information, and they'll even look at someone's pilot records. And a lot of people, when they're filing for their insurance, are coming up with bogus flight logs and saying, oh, I have this amount of hours. And then when an accident happens, they say, let me look at your logs, show me proof. and they find out that person doesn't have 1,000 hours or even 500, he's only got 50. Well,
Wow.
then things start happening. So that was actually a conversation about 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Esther, what do you got?
No, I just wanted to react on that because I think, it's different if you are a startup or a drone company than a one-person pilot. Because if you are a company, and I do work with companies, you have the investors, you need to comply with a lot of rules, and you must collect this data internally. It's not even a question. If you are a one pilot, one drone operation, you say whatever you want to say, kind of, but if you're a company, you have obligations, right? And you cannot hide, at least in Europe, when an accident happens. And for example, Manna, just recently an accident happened, and it's everywhere, and they take a lot of lesson learned and improve from it and move on. And I think this is where I see the difference between you are an enterprise startup or a one-person operation, and this is how your internal processes and reporting are different. But I do agree, if you are a one-person pilot, you just want to claim an insurance and some money, and you try to hide, right, as much you can. Then if you're an enterprise, you need to be honest and transparent for a lot of reasons. They force you to be honest. Yeah.
Well, also just people internally in the company force each other, right? So
yeah,
because they think, well, I'm not risking my hide for the company, so we're going to report this accurately. And the larger the corporation, the more rules and regulations and the more knowledge each employee has of those requirements. So I see what you're saying in terms of if you're going to look to which data you could trust, you probably would favor a large bulk data dump from a corporation who's invested in reporting. I just want to bring up just a comment from the chat. So Rescue 911, we did a webinar with NASA for Drone Safety Day this year. So thank you for.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for letting our audience know about that. Esther, you were going to comment before I cut you off?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, I'm really far from being expert on this, but if I know well, in Europe, if there is a drone accident, there is an investigator who is aviation person must come, and you need to also engage with the civil aviation authority in the country where it happened. So there is some musts what you need to comply with, in Europe. But again, if your accident happens behind your house in the forest, of course, you don't need to, it's a voluntary reporting. Yeah.
And I know we're going to move on, but just super quick, when I was chief of operations law at Air Combat Command, was doing these investigation report reviews. I actually wrote a guide about this and helped update the regulation with a very lengthy checklist, incorporating kind of all the different things that you need to think about. So, this has been something on my mind for a while. Thank you so much, Dave, for bringing this one up. I think this is a great topic, one that needs to, be discussed further in the industry, to be sure. But Mike, we're going to move to the next one.
Yeah, so next up, we got something from Esther here about $5 billion in drone investment over 2 years, 129 startups, 170 new craft. But I think the meat of this article, or what makes it really interesting, is how that money got distributed. So Esther, you want to give us a little bit of a deep dive into this?
Yeah, when you asked me to look for an article, I started to search for financial data-driven articles. I love those ones. I think the biggest hot topic currently in the industry is, where is the money? How are we gonna make revenue? How are we gonna get investment? How can we grow? At least in Europe, So one of the hottest topic is always the investments and revenue generation questions. So yeah, I found this article really interesting. I think if you go more deeper in it, they say it's basically 5-6 big companies received most of this amount. I think Globhe Aviation. Now I don't recall all of them, so I try not to say all of the names because I worry I miss out someone. But basically 5-6 of them received the biggest amount, and I think what is super impressive is that in 2 years, this great investment started to grow in 2 years. So pandemic somehow, grew the appetites of the investors investing in drones and flying taxis. And I think I cannot talk anymore with the article saying that most of the investors are looking for currently quicker revenue and quicker successes regarding last mile delivery operations, regarding smaller drones, and they see the flying taxis in 6-10 years. So when they drop down this money to the companies, they have expectations around 10 years, So the question is how this next 10 years going to look like for the air taxis, and in the meantime, which successes these drone companies can bring, to show some positive outcome for the investors. I think, and after I'm really curious about your opinion, I think in Europe, at least, the regulatory framework is there already. It's very different than the FAA in America, Here you can fly BVLOS, you can get, SORA, which you don't have in America. So, here I think now the ball is in the company's courts, and not anymore at the regulators, not anymore, in the investors' courts, but really in the company's, courts. What do they do with the money, with the regulatory framework? What's next? They sign up customers. How do they do the last mile delivery? How do they apply for approvals from the civil aviation authorities? And I think this is a very interesting topic currently, because finally we cannot point to the regulators, we cannot point to the investors because we have all of these. So we should start to take action as an industry, and I think that's very exciting.
Yeah,
I see Dave chomping at the bit there.
Well, I think Esther nailed it when she said that, the regulatory framework is already in place over in Europe and it's not in the United States. I think that's the biggest frustration that a lot of us face. I love the fact that, there's money being poured into it. Dawn and I, we've had this conversation before. People in our industry are screaming where the money is, and I keep turning around and saying, the currency of our industry is not money, it's trust. And the money will come. But it would be nice if we had a framework in place that we could go a lot faster than we presently are.
Yeah, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, we're inching towards regulatory clarity in the United States, and I will say inching. There was the walk, run, or crawl, walk, run model, which I think almost too much focus was put on to give an excuse to crawl longer than we needed to. So taking that aside, though, the biggest issue this year was the RDQ decision. Was that going to hold things back further because not enough diligence had been done in the first place? So that's off the table now. The FAA is moving forward. We do have an example in Europe to look at now, so can't use that as an excuse where, this is completely new and there's no example of it worldwide. Hopefully that should lay the seeds for advancement on that front. The other thing that I thought was interesting, though, in this article that I kind of want to pull out is that a lot of the funding was going towards air taxis, or at least companies that I know that are in the eVTOL space, and less towards the smaller drones. So I think one thing to kind of pay attention to as this evolves, right, is to see whether or not there's consolidation among small players and they just end up owning a larger portion of it, or if there's going to be startups that start later and let basically eVTOL front the bill to get past this regulatory hump in the United States before they start giving out their 5-year business plans, because those are very different companies when you're going to an investor than saying, hey, I'm going to reinvent transportation infrastructure in cities. I need at least 10 years for that. I think an investor is more likely to hand that money over than, hey, I'm going to do last mile drone delivery to houses, and there's no regulatory framework yet, and we need 10 years, they're going to be like, well, how much money is that, right? I'd rather focus on the middle mile if I'm the investor personally. So I think those are the things to kind of pay attention to, and still be excited that money's coming in, right? I think that's the most important thing, is that the faucet hasn't turned off.
Yeah, no, that all of this is great. And, anybody that has had a baby, that between the crawl and the walk, there's a very minimal period of time. Esther's baby is 9 months old. My thinking is she's not crawling yet, but you'll see Esther, when she crawls, she's going to walk very shortly thereafter. And I agree with you, Mike. This crawl period has been way too long. Could you imagine a real human baby like crawling for 3 years before it decides to, the child decides to walk? I mean, we'd be like taking it to a doctor. What is wrong with this? What is wrong with this baby? There's something wrong with this baby. So, I think that's all true. I want to ping on something none of you have hit on, which is kind of terminology and what are we calling industry, right? So, this article, which is interesting considering it's in Forbes, I feel like conflates the word drone with, these larger aircraft. And there was a whole discussion on LinkedIn about this the other day, because, words matter. And it's really interesting, having just gone to the Advanced Air Mobility, Future of Vertical Flight or Future of Aviation conference in San Francisco a couple of weeks back. There's an AAM crowd, Advanced Air Mobility crowd, but even that crowd, there were dribs and drabs of drone conversation being brought into it, right? And then you go to commercial UAV, and maybe there's going to be like a handful, and I say a handful, of AAM or electric vertical takeoff landing companies. And then when we go to NBAA, BACE, National Business.
Be a lot more.
Yeah, National Business Aviation Association, right, Dave? NBAA, BACE in October in Orlando. That's the general aviation crowd. And they're pulling in a little AAM, a little bit of drone stuff, kind of just, but I guess my comment is these might be two separate crowds in essence, and I feel like the terminology is and should be different, but the lessons learned can be similar, as can those lessons be pulled from general aviation. Just like we started this conversation with safety accidents or aircraft accident investigations. Like all of these, these are separate spheres in a way, but they're all interrelated. They're all going to be flying in the same airspace. So, one of the first things we need to do is let's get the terminology down. What are we calling what? And we don't have that globally, right, Esther? I mean, you all have been using RPAS, right? Remotely piloted aircraft systems, which I love, because it's like, yeah, we're remotely piloting these things. Now, when they become fully autonomous, is there a new word that we're going to come up with? I don't know. But the uncrewed, unmanned, it's just negative. It's like it's not something. Is a drone
they say advanced aviation, sometimes
yeah.
they say that.
And the Joby, I guarantee the Joby
right?
people are not going around telling people they're making drones. Guarantee it. So what do you think, Dave?
Well, I think the terminology for drone at this point might as well just be called small unmanned aircraft, because that's what most of us think of when we hear it. I like the RPAS myself. It just makes sense. It flows better. It sounds nice. Doesn't have any negative connotation or make you feel any which way. It would be nice if we standardized. I see the small unmanned industry, the drone industry, as a stepping stone to urban air mobility. A lot of the mistakes that we make, and this is why it's important to report stuff, is it's not as bad when it's a 1/16 scale, or which would be the drone, as equivalent to a big Joby aircraft that's carrying.
Yeah, with no people on board. That was Esther's point, I think, earlier. Yeah.
So
yeah,
the drones is the stepping stone.
Yeah, I think there's the reason that these industries get conflated easily is because they have certain overlapping concerns. So there's some shared technologies, right? And that usually actually is more on the software side and less on the rotor side, which I think many people make that mistake. Even some of the early models you saw for these air taxis had completely unrealistic, physically absurd designs because they're like, it's just a quadcopter but bigger, right? So there's the overlapping regulatory concerns, the overlapping technologies. Where they deviate, though, is which clients are they serving and why, and that's a big one, right? So that defines how much money each of them can make and how. So do I have to have a lot of little customers that are all paying me, or do I just have 3 or 4 big clients and that satisfies the bills? It's going to be interesting. I think the advanced air mobility, urban air mobility market actually starts to find its client base, you'll probably even see a split within that in the providers, because there's ones that are certainly focusing on personal transportation as their mission, and then there's others that are focusing on replacing delivery, right? Mid-mile delivery. So that's kind of where my head is at for the market.
I would love for Eszter to close out kind of her thoughts on the article she picked.
Yeah, I think a lot of topic mentioned here. I think, at least in Europe, why they are mentioned together, because, both of them innovation in the Civil Aviation Authority. So normally how it works in Europe, there is a bunch of people who works in an innovation department, and everything which is new and exciting goes to them. And drones happened like this, and after it grew, as soon as they realized they're not just a toy, but they have purposes, they're solving problems, and a lot more. And the department grew and grew and grew, and the innovation department, AAM, innovation started to come in as well, And I think this is why a lot of events and other initiatives mention those things, at least in Europe, under one hat, because they are all in the innovation, department. And I think, what's the problem, what that solution solves? That's the question. If I forget to buy salt in the supermarket and the drone delivers me in 2 minutes when I'm baking, I am ready to pay a lot, because I don't need to sit in the car, buy the salt, this delivers to me. So I wouldn't say, drones not ready to create a decent revenue, because I think if they solve problems, people ready to pay for it, And I think people has a lot of problems which drone can solve, And I think this means they're solving different problems. If I want to go and ski in one of the locations in Switzerland, and I'm living in Zurich with train, it would take me 5 hours and I need to change twice, but with an air taxi I can go and ski. And in Switzerland there is a bunch of money, people has money, they're gonna use these air taxis to go to skiing, because in half an hour they are there, and they cost maybe 20% more than the train ticket. So I think they are not stepping stone in each other's, in my view. They're solving different problems, and they're creating their own revenue and business models with these different problems. And I think, one more thought, we got this great investors perspective and a bunch of money last 2 years for the air taxis. But it makes me think why, because in the last 5 years they already invested a lot in drones and in maybe other startups, because drones were here earlier than air taxis, because the motion of an air taxi just came now, And I'm not sure if you heard, but Paris announced by the Olympics they gonna expect air taxis in 2025, helping them, deliver politicians and others. I'm not sure which politician gonna sit in it in 2025 or 6, but I think they are very different. I really think a lot of drone companies secured investments before, and this is why now the investors focus more on air taxis, because it became more a reality, and regulation came, and it became something which make and bring, success. Yeah, this is how I see.
Yeah, certainly. It's future profits that smaller drone companies have to talk about when they go to investors, whereas there's a replaceable market and a clear need, I think, with big dollars for delivery and transporting, let's face it, affluent people. I think that's why that helped. Plus, it's the newer thing. So investors always like the newer thing rather than the older thing. But as reality kind of catches up, I think both have a bright future, right? So excited for that. We're going to take a quick break to just thank our sponsors. We've got 4 great sponsors, and we want to call out Drone Code Foundation, the great work they do, Dragonfly, Vodix for the innovative work that they're doing, and then also ISR Ideas, which was our first sponsor. Special thanks to General Poss. We thank our sponsors for everything they do to support this show. Also want to just remind people, if you're watching us on YouTube, or if not, and you like what you're hearing right here today, please head on over there and subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and pound the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode. You could also go to fullcrew.io and sign up to our newsletter list. So this way you could be informed anytime we're about to go live. That's the only thing we message you about, so please go on over there to sign up. I want to call out one, actually we got 2 comments from the chat. One I can't read. Sorry, Chris, if you could send that again. But the other one is from Kevin Sanders. Hi, Kevin. Nice to see you again. Dave is quite correct in that trust is a more valuable currency than actual money in this industry. So thank you for your support, Kevin. We're going to move over to Dawn's. It's not an article, but it's actually a case got settled in federal court. Would you like to tell us about this, Dawn?
Yeah, this is a big one. People, it may have kind of breezed by a lot of people. So especially in the drone or advanced air mobility industries, but artificial intelligence affects all, across the board, the entire tech sector. And this case was called Thaler, Thaler versus Vidal. And the question presented here was whether or not artificial intelligence alone could be listed as an inventor for purposes of patent law under the U.S. Patent and Trademark Act. And the answer the court gave here was absolutely not. Solely listing artificial intelligence as the only inventor is not acceptable. That under the plain law of the statute, under the plain text of the statute, it discusses individuals, and individuals under other case law are considered to be natural persons, aka human beings. So what happened here was this guy named Dr. Stephen Thaler. He's got a artificial intelligence he's created. It's called, I think, DABUS or DABUS, D-A-B-U-S. It's an acronym for Device for Autonomous Bootstrapping of Unified Science. And what this thing does, it pulls all kinds of open source information and creates ideas that can be patented separately. And the 2 ideas here were this thing called the neural flame and the fractal container. Taylor, because he had absolutely nothing to do with creating these ideas for this invention, it was DABUS, it was the AI that did it, listed solely that AI as the inventor. And that's what kind of sparked the case, because the Patent and Trademark Office declined the applications. And so he filed a lawsuit in federal district court. It made its way up, and across the board they said, nope, it's got to be a human. Now, what are the implications of this? There's a couple, because as Mike alluded to in the very beginning, this is an international issue. I mean, my son just showed me a beautiful painting completely created by AI, right? So, when you think about intellectual property, who is the owner, who is the creator of that for purposes of patenting or copywriting or trademarking that? And at least in the United States right now, at least under case law, interpreting the Patent and Trademark Act, the answer is it cannot be the AI. And so here's the implications. If AI patents in the US was able to patent these works, it would be in the public domain. Okay, So there's a couple ramifications to this. One is that could it decrease R&D on the human side? If AI is out there creating all this stuff, will it flood the market, if you will, and all the good ideas will be taken up by the computers? So again, really, really weird stuff. Internationally, a big concern. There are countries that have policies on this, but there's no kind of one international standard. And so I read a different article, Mike. I didn't send it to you, but there's 4 paths here. Number 1, don't make any legal changes. Let this all resolve by itself. We're kind of seeing that a little bit in the U.S. and the drone world with race day quads versus FAA, where, like, well, let's just, let it live and let live and figure out what's going to happen. You can absolutely prohibit the AI from being an inventor. That's what kind of happened here. The upside doesn't interfere with human R&D, but it can decelerate investments in AI itself.
Yeah, because there's no incentive to develop the technology then if whatever you make with it will be open sourced.
Here's an interesting path. Allow the AI works, allow them to create these works, but do not protect them. And so this can facilitate innovation in AI tech, promote its use for public good. But then there's a whole bunch of other questions related to this. Who's going to bear responsibility if there's negative consequences of those inventions? And last is allow and protect the AI works. Again, boosting the AI sector, possibly at the expense of human R&D, devaluing human creativity. But could there be limitations? Maybe it's protected for a year. Maybe it's protected only in certain sectors like health and education. So many weird open questions, but super relevant. I don't know that any AI is absolutely creating advanced air mobility aircraft or things related to drones, but you could see that AI is weaved technologies all throughout those drones. So what happens when it starts self-perpetuating? Big questions here, guys. So Eszter, what are your deep thoughts on this?
Yeah, living in Switzerland, my opinion is that somewhere in the middle, So I'm a big fan of automation, but I think there is always need for a human interaction. So I think, in my humble opinion, but again, I'm not an AI expert, but what I think is that there should be automation, there should be AI, but it should be reviewed by humans, and it should be connected, to someone responsible for the outcome. And this is how I see, and I think it's fantastic. We should automate, we should use software, we should have everything in place, but there should be a person who check the end results, who take responsibility for the end results, and who think that's the end results which she or he can stand for, And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle in this mixture. And like that, the pattern can be connected to a person, and the person knows what happened exactly, how it happened, can review, and maybe it's a little bit slowed down the process. I can see that, and maybe it involves even manual work somewhere in the process, So it's not gonna kind of boom and automate that quick. But I think that's the way, somewhere in the middle. This is how I see. But I'm very keen to listen to the others' thought as well.
Dave, what do you think?
So when you had spoken, a couple words jumped out at me: consequence, responsibility, and devaluing. I think we need to have some level of responsibility in the work that's performed, and if artificial intelligence is responsible for that, I don't know where liability then goes. So I am a firm believer in having some air gap, some separation between human and computer. I spent my whole career doing software development, and I love the way that artificial intelligence has evolved over the years, and machine learning, just everything about it is exciting and awesome. But I don't see it being necessary to go 100% all the way.
Yeah, makes sense. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, well, I want to call out what Chris's emoji was. It was the heart symbol you always do. So,
Very cool.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of my favorite things because I think AI machine learning algorithms get discussed so poorly. People tend to graft onto the magic aspect of or magical language of them, rather than and think of them as in terms of creatures rather than what Jared Lanier would call just useful tools, right? Advanced tools. And if you think of it as a tool, then it's a little bit easier to grasp what its legal place would be. And so a tool obviously can't hold a patent then. What we're getting into, though, is these tools are able to efficiently replace once only human capacities at a level that is not even always better, but more consistently successful, right? So you could have a human that performs 100% 9 times out of 10, but over time will degrade, whereas this will hit 97% of the time over 10 million and will never degrade from that, and that changes things, I think, quite a bit. In terms of the broader implications of this, though, I'm really happy you brought this one to the fore, Dawn, because I've been seeing a lot of these AI art generators and people getting super excited about them and what they're doing. And one of the things that's interesting about it is everybody seems to ignore that the AI is not generating these results on its own at all. It's responding to prompts, which in that case, what you're really seeing is a new programming language that is accessible to everybody. So it's not just Mike who learned how to do software development, it's Dawn who has a creative idea. We are both actually now on equal footing. So I think that's supremely interesting in terms of this tool's ability to actually create more IP rather than less.
And Mike, this is probably a great segue to your article. So I don't know if you want to bip that up. And as he's doing that, real quick, just to close this one out, the question that remains open, almost what you just alluded to, Mike, is what happens when there is a human contribution? In other words, how much human contribution matters for purposes of this? Because this holding only focused on AI that was solely invention that was solely created by AI. So still a lot of open questions, but don't just put your AI on the patent application. That's the bottom line. And here's a great application of AI. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just to finally sum that up, though, I would argue that those AI algorithms probably were working off of human input in aggregate anyway. So
probably
somebody coordinated the aggregation of that input, and the question is, are they responsible if that invention now kills somebody? Legally, yes, right? So that's interesting, and also just what we're talking about here kind of dovetails into it a little bit. So diagnostic robotics has AI catching health problems before they take you to the ER. So preventative care, especially in the United States, is a hot topic, mostly because we're really bad at it in comparison to other countries. And what this diagnostic robotics, bad name for what it seems what the company is doing, maybe they pivoted, but they're basically taking kind of health cues from you and behavioral cues from you to determine whether or not you might need preventative care. Now, on the face of this seems really, really good. And my actual gut instinct for what made me grab the article was, hey, this is a great use for this technology. But I also want to bring up some of the nuances that were discussed here, which is it could be used to track whether or not somebody's depressed from highly correlative data, like that they're seeking more medical providers in a short amount of time, or that they've dropped off from actually showing up to appointments that used to be regular. So that's making quite the inference. And what this article kind of brought up that I thought was a little bit non-journalistic was that the insurance companies would have no negative incentive for this data. And I think they have plenty of negative incentives for this data, actually, when you just take a small lens to it, knowing whether or not somebody's depressed based on their behavior. We've already seen that could be used for negative ad data. Why would it not be used to control insurance claims?
Yeah, I
So,
totally agree with that. I want to go around the room here, but real quick, just to kind of back up what Mike's saying. So this company, Diagnostic Robotics, is Tel Aviv based. They just raised 45 million to scale up this particular technology. And what it is, it's AI that's been trained on 65 million anonymized medical records. Okay. And it aims to predict and avoid dangerous and costly medical crises, everything from depression, as Mike alluded to heart conditions. And so, and the claims are that it can reduce ER visits by 3/4, which is important beyond immediate benefits.
well, that'd
And
be
as
great.
Mike, yeah, it would be great.
Yeah, that's the
But
stuff we want,
also,
right?
like Pollyannish, it says this kind of prediction can't be used to raise your premiums or deny care. And my comment is, really? And so I would love, Eszter, what are your thoughts on this thing?
I had two thoughts. One of them is the trust. We have this situation in drones and AAM. People don't trust, in the innovation. Like they never trusted in cars before, and now they use every data. So I think it's the same challenge with this AI. I go to the hospital and they tell me, hey, there is an AI software who's gonna tell you go to the AI or not. I gotta say, no, I want a human who checks me, right? Because this is, and I even work in innovation. Can you think about my mom or dad, or others? It's the same with drones. There is no distrust in the technology. Even if they know, they want a human, who check them. And this is the people behavior. This is a societal challenge.
Yep.
So yeah, I can see Dan is really agreeing. So I think this is going to be their biggest challenge, this startup. Even if the software is right, even if everything what they promise is true, the societal approval, that's going to be a really something what they need to work on, and they can fail with this easily. That was one thing. And the other thing, I just Googled here because I saw this movie ages ago, Sally, when they, this movie when they land on the Hudson, the miracle on the Hudson,
Yes.
Yeah, so I love this movie, guys. You know why? Because this shows exactly, when the guy goes in front of the judge and they count and they simulate and they say based on AI and based on machine learning, you're supposed to do this and this and this, and and he just answers, hey, I'm a human, I made a decision in that moment. I had no this data in front of me. I had to make the decision, and that day it's a human decision what I made, and that's again point to the same direction, is that there is this human part involved, and we're making decisions, and there is this AI software who maybe makes the perfect decisions, but end of the day, a human gonna make the end decision. This person goes to the AI or not. Of course, this data gonna help in that decision, and if you have it, and it's fantastic. But I do believe this should be a human decision, and there is a societal approval there as well. I think which all the innovation, especially AI, need to fight with.
So I think,
Great point.
yeah, just to clarify before we ask Dave his thoughts, like I think one of the things that people often miss on this is the AI baked, as in it's no longer learning from its information? If that's the case, it's easier for us to evaluate whether it performed against its own benchmark, and if there was a failure there in terms of looking at it afterwards. If it's not, and it's actively learning on the job, that creates all sorts of legal dangers and Kafkaesque nightmares where a person could be trapped in a wrong result and with no reasonable ability to argue their point, because now no expert is able to say why they are wrong or right in any respect. It's just the computer, the blinking light told me. We can't get to that situation, and I think actually we instinctively know that, which is why we don't trust these things implicitly.
I want to. So Eszter talked about like this situation where she wants to go to the ER, and they're telling her you can't because our algorithm doesn't think you need to go. How about the flip side of that, where they call you and say our algorithm says you must go? And what if you choose not to go? Then what? Like, well, you didn't go, and now this, right? So I mean, just think of all the weird issues. Dave, over to you.
So I think one of the things that can't be taught is judgment, and that is probably what Eszter was touching upon. So I was smiling as I was hearing that, and I would agree with you on that, on Dawn, as well, as about, listen, they're gathering data, and at the end of the day, everybody's in business, and they're basically taking our information and finding a way to monetize it. I would prefer personally to have that final decision made by a doctor, and I would also agree with Dawn, on the flip side of your point. If someone came up to me and said, our algorithm says you need to go to the doctor, and I turn around and say, no, I'm not comfortable, well, then what does that happen? What happens? Does my insurance policy get canceled? Does this happen? Does all the liability change? Does the lawsuit now, like, I can't now claim malpractice? I mean, it could go in so many different directions, and it's kind of scary when you open up Pandora's box.
It is. I Mike, before I just want to make one comment on this, and then that's it.
Yeah, sure.
What worries me a little bit about this data, and Dave, you used the right term. This is data. Okay, so you're playing the percentages with human doctors do all the time, right? You go into a doctor, you present with these things. They're going to kind of cycle through. Okay, here's the most common thing probably that you have, right? But when you're relying on the AI and it's relying on this data that it's compiled, what about the outliers, right? What about the outliers? Are they falling through the cracks? And that's where that human touch and judgment, is that Eszter said, and judgment that Dave said comes into play. Because I'm not, without getting into gory details, I had I know somebody that had a ski accident, had pain in their side, went right. So presenting, you would think, oh, that's just going to be like a bruise or whatever. Well, here, like, they literally had a congenital thing where their ureter was being pinched off by a vein that had grown over it. And had they not had the freak accident, they would have lost their kidney. Wow. Now, is AI going to catch something like that? Like, you present, first of all, I said, well, you're probably not, you just have a little pain. You probably don't need to go to the ER. So, like, just think of it. And that's, again, it's a crazy scenario, but it's a true one. And that's what worries me, is the outliers. Back over to you, Mike.
Yeah, so that brings up a great point, which is, you might, a lot of healthcare is based on, like, 70% of people will fall into this category, so we're confident in giving that prescription for and expecting this result when we do, and only when that fails do we move on to the next step. And sometimes people in that 30% group, and that percentage varies, they're left out in the cold, right? They have to wait longer to discover what the actual issue, or sometimes they die. My grandfather had a great phrase: "Bad doctors bury their mistakes," and the thing that,
Yikes.
Yeah, well, it makes you think thoughtfully about whether or not you just completely and implicitly trust your doctor, right? So if this is positioned as just another doctor's opinion, and you could take it or leave it to then make a step, that's something that I'd be for. Right? And I think that's, especially if the algorithm is baked and we know what its benchmarks and prejudices are, then that's actually a useful tool now for healthcare. And, the healthcare system, why do we trust it at all? There's strong things like HIPAA laws that help us trust it. So I think this is going to force us to think in terms of data privacy, what it really means, because we can't just be forfeiting over our data implicitly anymore. I think we've gone past that era where we just hand over things to the cookies and expect a good result from these supposedly beneficial corporations. We understand they have their own atavistic needs, and it's good. They do drive innovation. We wouldn't have what I think would be a good healthcare advancement without this company having a selfish interest. But that doesn't mean that we just hand it over, right? We have to start thinking about what do we want the regulators to be in charge of here to make sure this thing doesn't go off the rails? What do we actually need in terms of trust to make this system useful for humans and not actually antagonistic towards general populace? But you know what? This is all great that we're finally discussing it, and I'm so happy to be having awesome conversations like this with our guests. Thank you, Eszter. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today. Dawn, we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up this week. You want to tell us about it?
You know what, Mike? Let me see if here we go. All right. So tomorrow on Twitter Spaces with full crew, we'll be live there. So grab your phone and join us with Jennifer Richter, partner at Aiken Gump, and CEO of Modal AI, Chad Sweet. Wednesday on the Dawn of Drones, we have Josh Olds from the Unmanned Safety Institute doing great things in the training and safety arena. And then this week on our Drone Law Connections Clubhouse, we have Jasmine LaFleur from a nonprofit called Greater Than Tech, doing amazing things to inspire the next generation. Next week on our cruise, same time, same place, we have AAM and vertiport experts, Yolanka Wolf from the Community Air Mobility Initiative and Rex Alexander from 5 Alpha. And then we resume with the Full Tilt Tech Industry Leadership Talks next Tuesday, the 23rd, 9 a.m. Mountain, with an incredible leader, Yoav Amitai, the CEO of Elsight. So join us on this journey. We hope we'll see you there in all of these.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank our audience for participating. Again, remember to subscribe on YouTube. And I guess we're out here again.
Thank you.